Greetings folks and welcome to the Electromaker podcast. This is the audio version of your midweek roundup of all things maker and embedded and lovely. This week is all about Starnote, or to give it its full name, Starnote for Skylo. This is one of the latest things that Blues has brought out, and if you're familiar with Blues, who used to be called Blues Wireless, they make those wonderful little edge connector cards for different kinds of communication. Whether it's Wi-Fi or cellular IoT or LoRaWAN and now satellite, they have a very easy way of working with their entire product range, which is basically just JSON commands. We have an interview in the show with Brandom Satrom from Blues. He is the SVP. We actually had a conversation with him a while ago about a different product of theirs, and Starnote was right around the corner, so we also just had a nice decent chat about it at the time, which we thought might be a handy thing to have in the bag, and it turns out of course it was, because it is also now our product of the week. So we'll also have Robin, our gadget guru, to take you through it as well. That's not the only thing in the show. We have a nice Zigbee deep dive from the YouTuber Great Scott, but other than that I think that is everything. Just a quick reminder that if you would like to support us, the Electromaker shop is by far the best way to do so. We occasionally have sponsored segments like our ongoing thing with Embedded World that we've been doing, but for the most part that's how we make our bread and butter. So with all of that said, I think it is time for us to get on with the podcast. It is time for our product of the week, which is the Blues Starnote. But before we get into that, we need to announce the winner of our SenseCap S2104 competition from last time. This is a thing from Seed Studio, which is a wonderful LoRaWAN-enabled sensor system that is for soil sensing. You put a probe into the ground, and this is a ruggedized box with a 10-year battery life. It's an amazing thing. If you'd like to find out more about it, check the link below. But the point is, this is something that you can set up in a field somewhere, and then you can check the soil temperature and moisture from a distance quite simply. And we now have a winner. And that winner is Corey Bitney, who says, I am starting a lavender farm in a field that has a large amount of clay present. I've been looking for products to closely monitor moisture on a continuous basis, since lavender doesn't like wet feet and is prone to root rot. The SenseCap S2104 looks like a great solution. And it really does, and what a wonderful person to win this prize. Just a quick reminder, Electromaker puts these competitions on and asks you to put the hashtag in so we can collate all the entries. We also ask what you're going to do with it, but that's not how we choose the winner. That's just because I love reading all of those things. But the winner is chosen at random, but I can't think of a better example of the right comment winning this. So congratulations, Corey. We'll be in touch with you as to how we can get this kit out to you, if indeed someone from Electromaker hasn't already reached out to you. But yes, that was our product of the week for this week. If you would like to find out more about it, I still think that in terms of the industrial level of goodness that this kit is, it is absolutely worth the money. It is an order of magnitude cheaper than most other industrial agriculture devices, so do check out the product of the week link below for last week's one. But it's time to move on to this week's product of the week, which is the Blues Starnote. It is time to move on to our product of the week, which is the Blues Starnote. Now, we talked about the Starnote before on the Electromaker Show, because we actually interviewed them about it on at Embedded World. There'll be a link to that interview below, and that was around about the time that they first announced it. Now it's been out for a little while, people have got their hands on it. Our in-house gadget guru Robin has had his hands on one. I'm not sure if he had by the time he filmed this product of the week, but there's going to be a fair bit of content about it. So let's just get straight down to the basics. Blues are a company that create communications devices. We've talked about them before. Their little note cards are the easiest way to get started with Wi-Fi and cellular IoT. It all works using JSON commands back and forth, and they have these note carrier boards that you can put them in and incorporate them into almost any project. They also have their own microcontroller board, an STM32 based board called Swan, which is in a feather form factor, but it'll work easily with any board because you can just talk to it over UART. Again, this is just JSON. You can talk to a note card with pretty much anything. The Starnote is not a note card in and of itself, it is an accessory to a note card that adds satellite communication to any setup you already have going. So Starnote, or Starnote for Skylo to give it its full name, is designed to be a cost-effective way to get into working with satellite communication and with great ease of use. Now, we've already talked about the ease of use a bit in that introduction. It's all just JSON commands. The big thing here is the barrier of entry in terms of cost. Historically, getting into satellite is not easy. You'd need to spend thousands upfront for the hardware and quite a lot just for the usage. Now, satellite is still not cheap to use, but the way Blues have approached it is really quite good. This is designed to be a failover or a backup, and you're sending minuscule amounts of data up to the cloud on a price plan that you can change at any time with Blues. It's incremental. There's no carrier fees, there's no monthly monthly cost. You just buy the hardware up front and you have a certain amount of allotted bandwidth that you can use. And this will be in the kilobytes. You're going to be sending a small amount of data. This is for failover stuff or something you really don't want to lose. And then when that runs out, you can top it up using numerous ways. Blues have always made this very transparent and easy to use. If you want to find out more about that, again, there'll be links in the bio. As always, you shouldn't be relying on my take. We have our in-house gadget guru, Robin Mitchell, who has created a full product of the week video. There's also an article you can read about it that goes through every element of how this works, where you might want to use it in your project, and where this is the perfect way to get into satellite communications. Rob Lauer from Blues has put out a tutorial specifically showing how you can use the satellite service to send SMS messages, which is kind of something you might want to be able to do with it. You might want to be able to send certain payloads of messages depending on various things. This is using Twilio as the backend to receive that stuff as a text message. But what better way to get to know the Blues Starnote than hearing from someone from Blues themselves? We interviewed Brandom Satrom, the SVP from Blues, a while ago, I spoke to him and had a really long conversation about various things, but we spoke specifically about the Starnote, exactly thinking about a time like this, and yes, is the perfect time to go back to that now. So without any further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Brandon and past me. So I am joined by Brandom Satrom from Blues. Thank you so much for giving me the time again to chat with you further about Blues stuff. We chatted recently about the Arduino Opta time they've done, adding wireless to the Arduino Opta. If you'd like to see that, that will be linked wherever you see this as well. But we're going to talk today about Starnote. Now, most folks who watch the Electromaker Show are technically minded at different degrees. Some are engineers and some are makers, but most people have some kind of an understanding that you can have a Wi-Fi module that will allow your microcontroller or single board computer to talk to Wi-Fi. And that same Wi-Fi module may allow you to talk to Bluetooth. And these are both sort of short distance, and you have to be attached to a hub. And most folks, again, have a fair understanding of cellular because most folks, well, they have a phone to begin with. But nowadays, the idea of cellular devices is something that is has a lot more understanding behind it. But I get the impression, perhaps falsely, but that I get the impression that satellite is a little bit more kind of mysterious because we all have maps on our phone. We understand that our watches can talk to satellites. But the idea of using that as a communication protocol is something that might be quite new to a few people. So is something that works with a note card, and you've described it as a failover device. So it's designed for use only when other things aren't possible. But where does satellite fit into this? How is satellite now becoming something that you can use as a data back and forth?
Yeah, well, it's an interesting, satellite's an interesting world because, like you said, Ian, I mean, we've had, global positioning and GNSS available in phones and watches for a few decades now, and it's something that we're sort of all used to, that when a device, whether it's our watch or phone, has an open line of sight to the sky, that we'll be able to figure out where our thing is, and that's true increasingly of vehicles and bikes and you name it. But this concept of satellite as a communication backhaul outside of expensive satellite phones used by secretive governments and things like that. Maybe that's the sort of narrative we had in the early Iridium days of the late 90s and early 2000s. But this idea of being able to use satellite for blue ocean type use cases, it's been possible for a while, but quite expensive. But as the economics of launching a payload into space and deploying a satellite has come down, what's also come down is the price points and our ability to actually do the same thing with data, where you can actually send small bytes or kilobytes of data over those same constellations, whether they be a low Earth orbit constellation that's streaming across the sky every 90 minutes, or whether it's a geosynchronous constellation which has a constant view of the area of the Earth that it's covered. But Starnote for us was, we had a lot of customers that we've always been a multi-radio access technology company. Even when we were cellular only, the reality was the note card was always multi-rat, right? We had 2G, 3G, we had an NB-IoT, Cat-M, LTE, Cat-1. Those are all different radio access technologies that we tend to look at as just cellular, but they have differences in transmit power and coverage and ability to use tracking and things like that. And so when we added Wi-Fi, and then when we started looking at LoRa, we had a lot of customers that simultaneously said, this is interesting. We're building something that's in a logistics use case. This is going on the side of a shipping container, or I'm in agriculture. And so I love that I have cellular for you guys primarily, but every once in a while, maybe it's once a month, or maybe it's once a day, or maybe it's based on a specific use case or a trip of a device, I lose connectivity completely and I don't get it back for a day or two, or I don't get it back for several hours and I need to know what's happening. I have to use satellite. And these customers would say, I have to use satellite with another provider. It's expensive. It would really be great if you guys had that radio access technology or that RAT in your portfolio. And so we've been paying attention to the space, and we spent a lot of last year developing Starnote, developing, this product, which comes in two flavors. One has the embedded beautiful red Ignion antennas, and then another actually has the UFL antenna connectors. And as you said, Ian, Starnote is, you'll see that this is one of our Note carriers that has this, the Note Carrier XS, that has space for both the Note card and Starnote. That it's meant to be used alongside of a Note card. It looks like a Note card. It's not a Note card. It's a Note card accessory. But what it does is it adds satellite as an additional radio access technology to any Note card. And it does so as a failover. Again, because that's the primary use case that we have seen, is that the way that we have built the Note card, 100% JSON. You talk to it with JSON, you get JSON back, you configure it with JSON commands. And one of those commands that you can configure is how the Note card manages its transport across different radio access technologies. So we have Note cards that have Wi-Fi and cellular baked in. So you can use the Note card to say start with Wi-Fi, but when Wi-Fi is unavailable, go to satellite or go to cellular. And when you add the Starnote to that, it gives you satellite as an additional failover radio access technology. So you can specify rules, and you can tell the Note card, again, all with JSON, I want you to use Wi-Fi, fail over to cellular, and if that's not available, fail over to satellite. And you can also specify, and when you're on satellite, don't send all the same data you send over Wi-Fi because that's expensive. Just send one note, just send one message with just these critical fields. And so a developer has this ability to easily integrate satellite without having to know anything about how satellite works, without having to know anything about byte stuffing or making sure that you're only getting a few bytes, or 50 byte payloads over at a time and no larger than 256. The Note card handles all of that. The same way the Note card makes cellular easy, we've tried to take that same approach with satellite. Yeah.
I suppose a rather naive kind of idea for a use case for it. And I say naive because this is something that obviously I've never had to build or program myself. But I could imagine if you did have something which would be traveling, like you say, the example of a shipping container or something, and you were getting all kinds of data, including position and all of this kind of stuff. I suppose you could always be in a position where if there was any kind of failure, there might be something you really did need to know specifically, like, for example, internal temperature, which would be a critical thing that you'd need to know moment by moment. And so having that kind of failover would mean that you're sending much, much less data, just the essential data that you need, but you're getting that data through. And again, I think that's something that that's something that wouldn't necessarily occur to a lot of people who are kind of working more in the hobby end of stuff. But the other side of it, though, is with the with the original Note card, one of the things I loved about it when I was playing with it and learning about it is that I got this Note card and I plugged it in and I was just going. There was no topping it up to begin with. There was no paying a monthly fee. I would eventually need to if I was going to be shifting loads of data. But the idea being that while I learned how to use it, I could make it a purely Wi-Fi thing and just get the ins and outs of it. And then by single command, you could say, okay, when Wi-Fi isn't available, then you could start doing cellular. And the Starnote's the same, right? You ship it out with the satellite equivalent of prepaid data plans, right?
We absolutely do. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So when we launched the Note card, it was important to us to include data in the cost of the device. With cellular, we have the same approach with satellite. Our network provider for Starnote is a company called Skylo, and as a part of the device itself, it comes with 18 kilobytes of data. Now, the Note card cellular comes with 500 megs. 18 kilobytes is a lot less, but again, like you said, and like I mentioned previously, as a failover device, it's meant to be a very small, small payload sent infrequently. But we wanted to give developers the ability to use this thing as needed without having to shell out any more than what you were paying for the product itself. And so that's very important to us, that there isn't a subscription as a part of this, that it is like you can use the 18K if you need more. Yeah, we will, we'll bill you for it, but you can use this to start and you don't have to feel afraid of, oh, I've started the clock, so I need to not experiment with satellite too much because I don't want to start to, I don't want to be paying out the nose for it. So yeah, we absolutely have baked that into the product.
And presumably, even for folks who weren't necessarily doing this in a kind of mission critical situation where they maybe wouldn't want to have to throw any extra money at it, but they still wanted this, even in the context of, say, someone who had something set up at home on their grounds somewhere, like you hear people these days who have got quite a lot of space, especially even people like ranchers are starting to use things like LoRaWAN for getting sensor signals from around different parts of the ground, right? I saw a fantastic project about that recently that I've wanted to talk about for ages. I haven't really had time on my weekly show. But I could imagine there being a situation where someone get the Starnote and they get the prepaid data on it, but they have it set up so the only time they would ever send something out through it is if cellular went down and there was a specific reason why they needed to actually get that thing out. So if cellular goes down for a day, that sucks, but it's okay. But if cellular goes down and the temperature sensor on site is reading 98 degrees, you need to know that now.
Absolutely.
So this kind of failover could sit and potentially be something that wouldn't necessarily need to be used and you wouldn't have to throw loads of money at, but it's just something that you could fit into your designs as literally a failover when things do fail and you need to know them, right? It's
absolutely right.
Situational is what I'm saying, right?
Yeah, absolutely right.
Yeah.
So if you're in a case where you've got this box on the side of a shipping container and you lose, a lot of ships now have their own Wi-Fi or their own cellular networks, but if those go down, you can make the decision as a developer. Is it important that I send out a heartbeat message saying I'm still alive, so you don't worry that the device is dead? It's still alive, but the network is down. Or are you okay with it coming back in 6 hours or 12 hours or a day or something along those lines? And you can sort of make that decision. And even when you do send a message out, maybe it's just that simple heartbeat and not all the telemetry that you're otherwise sending. And so the Note Card API is very robust in your ability to delineate between events that go when you're on a certain radio access technology versus those that go when you're not. And so you can tune those satellite messages to only send out in certain conditions and to only send small payloads out. And really, we want to give developers the control over exactly how much of that data that they use so that they can, not run out, so that it can actually be used for the lifetime of the device. 18 kilobytes basically translates to being able to send one 50-byte message every day, once a day for a year. So for many types of use cases, if you're sending less than once a day, you do the math from there. It ends up becoming a very easy thing to not have to rely on an additional regular cost outside of just the hardware itself.
For sure, yeah. And I mean, and that additional regular cost for now, at least, is still something that is a little bit more expensive. But I do find it somewhat interesting that, certainly in the last few years of our lives, we've gone through this. I'm exactly the right age that I grew up with no mobile phones really being a thing for the first few years. Then as a teenager, we all started sending text messages to each other at 10 pence. I'm from the UK, 10 cents a shot. And then suddenly there was mobile internet, but it was very expensive for a very small amount of bandwidth. I now have, alongside my mobile phone, I have a separate prepaid SIM card that gives me something like 10 gigabytes of very high-speed internet for less than $10 a month. And so this is something that has changed. And I can't help but wonder, I mean, what do you think? Is this something that you think might end up happening with satellite as well? Is that a little bit crazy to think? Or
no, I don't think it's crazy at all. I think you're right. Like to your comment earlier about sending text messages in the early days, we were paying, not only paying per message, but we were paying different costs for media messages versus text messages. Remember in those days? And nowadays, unlimited texting is just a feature of the device, whether you're on cellular or not. It's just, it doesn't make sense for the mobile network operators to attempt to monetize that part of the network infrastructure any longer. And there's a couple of factors in satellite that I think are going to create a similar situation here. One is the cost of, as I mentioned earlier, as the cost of launching a kilogram of payload into space comes down, the cost of sending a kilobyte of data will come down as well. That is definitely one factor, as is the fact that a lot of the mobile network operators across the world, whether it's Rogers in Canada, AT&T or T-Mobile in the US, or KDDI in Japan, you name it, are all investing in satellite companies. And they're investing in satellite companies as, in many cases, almost kind of quasi cell towers in space. That there is, additional network infrastructure, especially among the low Earth orbit constellations, where you can treat those in the largest constellations like Starlink's, for instance, have a constant, there's always one in view of wherever you are on the globe. And so you theoretically have that access where in remote areas, you don't have a cell tower available. You don't have Wi-Fi infrastructure. LoRa is fantastic for long range, but it itself only goes so far. And so I think what we'll see is as those mobile network operators develop comfort on sort of where that part of the industry is going, that satellite will be baked into more of our handsets, much like it is in the Apple iPhone today. You have satellite as a SOS failover. I was using this just recently, but it could just become a mainstream or mainline feature. We'll start to see it integrated into mobile data plans. And for the case of IoT, for connectivity use cases, I think we'll start to see those costs come down. It might be a while before they match cellular, but I think over the next 3 to 5 years, there will be more use cases where even if it's a little bit more than cellular, it's still inexpensive enough that you would consider it as a primary backhaul, not just as a failover.
Yeah. I mean, that would be a sort of awesome step, because that really is kind of the last step in having, a general purpose thing of saying, no matter where you are, no matter what you're doing, there's always going to be some way of actually getting this data away from where you are to wherever you want it to get to.
Absolutely.
So it is. And like I say, the reason I asked you about it is because I know next to nothing about satellite communication. And so my immediate thought was, hey, wouldn't it be nice if the same thing happened as what happened to mobile phones and data plans and things?
For sure. Yeah. Well, one of the things that I don't think we think a lot about is that only about 10% of the Earth is actually covered by terrestrial networks today. Yeah. And it actually is getting worse because as we move to things like 5G and 6G and beyond, it actually requires you to build a denser network to have the same amount of coverage.
Because you need the output. Yeah.
Right. And so we're actually creating the situation with terrestrial networks where we're decreasing coverage slowly. Now, for those of us that live in populated areas, we don't see it because we have cellular almost everywhere we go, except sometimes my house when the power goes out. But there are definitely a lot of places in the world, and it's not just blue ocean things, but even we have a customer that's working on building fire monitoring devices in the Australian outback. And in Australia, there is no terrestrial cellular in the interior of the country. There's just not. And so they have satellite as their only option. And so there are lots of cases where if it doesn't become the sort of like, well, if it's cost effective, we can use satellite. It becomes more of like, yes, we absolutely will use satellite as this primary or as this first backup, or because the costs will actually start to make sense.
For sure, yeah. I could postulate wildly about all the cool things this could mean for a long time, but we should probably get slightly back on point, which is if folks are sort of interested in starting out with Starnote, as I mentioned before, provided you're smart about it and you don't actually try and use it as a sort of primary thing, this is something that you can get from Blues as a pre-made thing. So say for folks who maybe already have like a note card and have been working with one of the other note carriers, and what would they need to get a hold of in order to start with Starnote? Because you mentioned before there's a new note carrier, which is the XS. And that is designed to work with a note card and one of the Starnotes side by side.
Right.
So if someone was already working with Blues things, presumably the note carrier XS and the Starnote is all they would need really to be able to get started with it, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. So we have a Starnote starter kit that includes the XS and either of our Starnotes, and then one of our Wi-Fi note cards. You can also purchase the XS separately and either of the Starnotes, depending on which one you're going to use. We do ship this version with antenna, so you can actually use it in an outside deployment, something along those lines. And so we have, that is sort of the best place to get started. The note card talks to the Starnote using JSON, same as the developer talks to the note card directly, and there's a serial connection between the two, and that's how communication is pre-wired on the note carrier itself.
Cool. And as always with any of the interviews that I do whenever I talk about stuff, in the show notes, whether that's under the YouTube video or in the podcast show notes, there'll be a link to the Starnote and the Blues shop and anything else I've referenced. In fact, I think it was actually off mic beforehand I was talking, or maybe I'll mention this in the show before the interview. There's a fantastic project from Rob Lauer, who's also with Blues, where he shows off a sort of text message system using Twilio, but the idea behind it is theoretically, if the Wi-Fi was unavailable and the cellular network was unavailable, this would still function using Starnote. However, as we talked about before, this might be a slightly expensive text message. But the theory is there, so you can sort of see this thing in action. And the one takeaway I had from that, which was kind of amazing, is that you set that thing up once. You set your logic for what you want your program to do, but then you just say to the note card, try and use Wi-Fi. If you can't do that, try and use cellular. If you can't do that, try and use satellite, and it will take care of that side of things for you. And that's the one thing that really grabbed me about it. But anyway, we could probably chat about this for a lot longer, but I want to let you get on with your day. But Brandon, thank you very much for giving me your time today, and I look forward to chatting again at some point.
Yeah, thanks, Ian.
So if you would like to find out more about Starnote, check the links in the description of this video. Our Product of the Week video is there, and of course Robin's video is on the channel. This is a Product of the Week, but we're not doing a giveaway about it quite yet. You'll need to keep a close eye on your YouTube channel for when we will be doing that giveaway. But right now, I cannot think of a better way to get started with satellite communications in your next project. If you are looking for a way of asset tracking that is completely unbreakable and that can track something around the world in almost every circumstance, this is going to be what you're looking for. And as with all things Blues, it's all JSON. It's all very easy to get started with. If you don't believe me, take a look at Blues' Getting Started page on their dev pages. They even have an in-browser terminal for doing all of the test work with. It's a really well thought out company, and I've said this from the very start. For someone like me to be able to use Blues' stuff as a non-engineer makes me very happy indeed. Now, in our continued series of Embedded World features, we've talked about various different aspects of the conference, but today, if you're a student, this one is for you, because Embedded World has a specific student day set out specifically for students, and you register for it slightly differently than you would for a regular conference ticket. So the 13th of March is the Student Day at Embedded World, and the entire day has a program of things set out specifically for students. Now, if you do want to sign up for this, check the link in our description. There's a link to the Student Day page. As I said, the sign-ups are slightly different. You sign up on the website with your university details, but you can also there download the Student Day program. And there's a few highlights of that, including there's going to be introductory speakers at the start of the day, one of which is Fabio Volante, who is the Arduino CEO. There's also the Student Day Rally competition. Embedded World really is trying to get as many students involved with the conference as possible, so they're trying to make it as easy as possible for you to visit, including supplying things like meals for you while you're there, and your transport, which is all part of the stuff that is on the program that you can download from the student page. So if you are interested in that, do check the links in the description. Another more general thing that I wanted to mention is that if you're thinking of visiting the Embedded World Conference, your ticket for the conference, for the Messe, is also your travel ticket in Nuremberg. That ticket will cover travel to and from the conference as long as you are in the Nuremberg area. It's just something that's worth mentioning. And whenever I say Nuremberg, by the way, that's just a German word for Nuremberg. If you'd like to see what our experience at Embedded World has been like as an Electromaker when we've been there covering it, check the last couple of shows I put out. I've talked about some of the people we've met there and the interviews we've put out. But for now, if you are a student, please do check the links in the description. And as I said at the start of this section, if you live in the USA and China, also check out the links down there for where the local Embedded World will be happening in your country. So we're going to move on to talk about Great Scott. Now, Great Scott is a YouTuber many of you are probably aware of. He's done a variety of fantastic tutorials on everything from the basics of electronics through to working with Arduinos. He has a well-known series which is finding gold in AliExpress listings, just what things you can sift through to find some things that are really worth buying. But in a recent video, he's talking about Zigbee because he switched over some of his smart home to Zigbee-enabled devices, using them with Home Assistant. And the video is not only a great introduction to Zigbee as a protocol, but a great introduction to how you can get started with Zigbee as someone who might want to make your own Zigbee devices using Arduino boards. Although when I say Arduino boards, what I mean is boards supported by the Arduino IDE, in this case the ESP32C6 and the ESP32H4. But as I mentioned, the video is a fantastic introduction to Zigbee anyway. It shows how general commercial Zigbee devices can be incorporated into a system, and provided you already have a Zigbee coordinator of some kind, and bear in mind you can get coordinator dongles for very, very cheap, under $20, you can mostly get Zigbee things going without much outside interference. And by that I mean proprietary apps. I think we've all had that thing where we've had the bubble burst slightly, where we wanted to get something really fun and smart home-esque, and realized that, you get it home and the light bulb that you wanted to just very easily incorporate into your own project or system has its own app. Well, as he shows in the video, one of the things he uses has its own app, but he manages to completely sidestep that by just connecting it to a Zigbee network and using it through Home Assistant without any of that nonsense. So it's really quite nice. One of the things he also mentions, which I think isn't really mentioned enough, is that Zigbee is completely local. A lot of Wi-Fi connected devices actually speak to the cloud, which is ridiculous considering you have your own local Wi-Fi network, but that's the way they work. Now, that's not to say that you can't circumvent that, but many things are designed not to do that at all and have some kind of cloud element, which seems a little bit ridiculous when you're talking about things that are localized to your home. I mean, localized, it's local. Now, the DIY element of the video is pretty much what you'd expect. He shows what you can do with commercial devices and then replicates that using different development kits. Two ESP32C6 devices and two ESP32H4, not devices, dev kits. And he also does a few things like testing their ranges and all that kind of stuff. And again, this is all stuff that you can do with the Arduino IDE. There is just pre-made firmware that you can just put on it that will work with Home Assistant straight out of the box, which makes it very, very easy to use. Now, later in the video, he goes into a few of the shortcomings of Zigbee, one of which is its quite slow data rate, which brings us to the inevitable thing, Thread versus Zigbee. This is the thing that always comes up when you're talking about smart home wireless communication protocols. And where I stand on it is the same as I always have pretty much since I first started reporting on Thread and Matter. Thread has a higher data rate and supports the Matter protocol natively, so even though it is younger than Zigbee and maybe doesn't have as many things that are supporting it out of the box yet, I still think that if I was to start a smart home today, I'd be looking out for Thread devices. Because the Matter protocol is just so wide and open and works on so many separate things. If I was going to be going DIY on the one hand and other stuff from actual commercial sellers on the other, Thread and Matter is where my money is. If you disagree with that, I'd be really interested to hear why, however. But anyway, that is a deep dive for another day. Great Scott is a YouTuber that I've been following for a very long time. I feel like I say this a lot, but it's the truth. He's one of the people who taught me some very important things I needed to know in the moment I needed to know them, as I am one of the many people of my generation who turn to videos before they turn to documentation. And if you would like to find out more and somehow are not following his channel but are following this one, there are links in the description, and you will find a rich history of incredible videos from him. That was our podcast for this week. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for your continued support and your continued patience. I understand that obviously podcasts with background noise are a little bit of an odd thing, but I haven't really had much of a choice. I've tried to find the quietest corner of any particular field I am in to record these podcasts, because if I didn't make it absolutely clear at any point beforehand, me and my family are traveling at the minute. We decided to take the plunge and go away for the first part of this year to New Zealand, because the kids are going to be in school age soon, and in Germany that's no joke. You can't really take any time away from that once they are in. So I am continuing to work, of course. This is what freelancers do. There is no such thing as a real holiday, and here we are doing the Electromaker Show on the road. So I hope the podcast has still been fun to listen to, despite the fact that there might be the odd bird, cricket or vehicle in the background, or indeed child, as you may be able to hear right now. But normal shows will be resuming when we get back to Germany later. Anyway, for now, I'd like to thank you for joining me. Thank you for sticking with the podcast. And if you do ever have any suggestions or just want to reach out to me, the Discord server is by far the best way to do that. You can find a link to that in the description of this podcast. I do also have an email address with Electromaker, which is ian@electromaker.io, although things slip through the cracks there just because, as with any commercial email address, I get an absolutely huge amount of emails, some of which are less useful than others. So Discord is by far the best way to do it. I look forward to hearing your suggestions for future shows, and if there's anyone you'd particularly like to hear from, I'd be very open to start interviewing folks on the podcast again at some point too. So do let me know if there's anyone like that you have in mind, but for now I wish you a safe, fun and creative week, and I'll chat to you soon.